quite a while. I've been suffering from consistent fatigue and mental fog. I wasn't quite sure what it was, and then about 2 years ago I was diagnosed with sleep apnea.
Just pull the mic up a bit closer.
So I've been treating that with a CPAP, and it's not been too helpful. I also have a dental appliance again. It hasn't produced, I don't feel like I did when I was 20. Anyways, so we have the CPAP, and I've always been interested in cognitive science and data science. So I decided to track myself, both my sleep using a ZEO and my mental performance using a program called Brain Workshop. Then about 3 months ago, I learned of a website called Quantified, which has a very comprehensive way to measure cognitive performance. So it has 25 different tests, and you can track multiple aspects of your mental performance. So I've been using that for about 3 months now. And here's an example of some of the tests available on Quantified. So you have, for instance, the choice reaction time measures how long it takes you to respond to one of the 3 circles turning green. And you have an NBAC, which tests, which you have to remember various stimuli and then remember what happened in trials previously and if they're a match. So it tests a lot of things like working memory, reaction time, that kind of stuff. So over the 3 months, my scores have, some of them have improved and some of them have stayed the same. So each one is kind of unique in that way. So for instance, in green, we have a 1-back score. It's shown some improvement. In red, we have attentional focus, which has remained, for me, has remained completely steady. So I haven't really improved on that at all. And then design copy, I've made tremendous gains in. Okay, so looking a little more detail at the Quantified Mind tests or subscores and seeing how they relate to each other. So we have, this just shows the correlations between the different tests. Red is very highly positively correlated, green is negatively correlated, and black is uncorrelated. So for instance, choice reaction time and mental rotation very strongly correlated positively. Cued attention and mental rotation negatively correlated, and design copy and mental rotation pretty much uncorrelated. These are some additional of the 25 tests, and there's, I guess, 2 striking features immediately apparent, and one is that the NBACs, self-paced 1-back, 2-back, 3-back, are all correlated as you would expect. They're also correlated with sorting strongly. But something very interesting, which I don't have an explanation for, is that mental rotation seems to be negatively correlated with all the other tests. And I don't know, surprising, and I'm not sure why. Now, I wanted to combine my ZEO data to see if that could predict my Quantified Mind data. And to do that, I created this thing called aggregate mental performance, which is a simple average of all the different Quantified Mind tests. And as you can see, there's a lot of black, which means not a lot of correlation. So right down here, AMP aggregate mental performance, and then the various ZEO components like time and REM, time and deep, and there's not much going on. So this is another perspective on relating the ZEO data to the mental performance. Here we have, on the y-axis, we have time and REM in minutes. On the x-axis, we have time and deep in minutes. And an interesting thing is that my lowest REM and deep score actually was one of my highest mental performance scores. So again, very somewhat counterintuitive. So using all the ZEO data And this monster equation, which is the best one I could find for predicting the mental performance score, I got a R-square of 0.3, which kind of confirms what we'd seen earlier, which is the ZO and mental performance are not that closely related. Especially when you consider the practice effect. So this is how my scores have changed over time. And you can see there the R-squared is 0.43. So basically it's saying that practice is more important than sleep, at least as measured by the ZO. However, the practice effect was, again, not the same for every one of the tests. So for the forward digit span, very strongly correlated. I made a lot of improvement, lots of practice effect there. Versus verbal learning, almost no practice effect. Okay, so kind of the big picture of what I've learned doing this is that working with data can be hard. Trying to get the different formats from the different, say, devices like the ZO versus the Quantified Mind and get the different programs to work together can be a hassle. And you're going to, at least I lost some data because it had it in different formats and trying to merge them. Just a lot of data didn't quite line up perfectly. And also important to do a standing check. I got lucky and only lost 2 hours instead of like 2 or 3 days because I just did a simple graph and realized that I'd aligned my data incorrectly at first. Okay, so just coming attractions of what I'm currently working on, some experiments. Fasting. So I'm measuring my glucose and ketones while fasting. On the left we have the glucose scale, on the right we have the ketone scale. And as you can see, the ketones are in blue pluses. And they show a very linear increase as the duration of the fast goes on. So I did a 48-hour fast, 2 48-hour fasts, which are represented up here. And that's one errant glucose measurement was an hour and a half after I had a very huge meal prior to beginning my fast. Otherwise, my glucose is, as it shows here, pretty much 90. And then even after 24 hours, it's only gone down to 85. So it's pretty steady. However, while I was doing that, in the process, I discovered that my glucose meters aren't that good. So comparing the measurements from the these two different meters only came out with an R-square of 0.46, which I would have expected. I don't know. I would have hoped for a lot better agreement between the two meters. Also, again, taking measurements within 10 minutes of, all the measurements within a 10-minute time span. And on this meter, I got a range of 70 to 107, which to me is, it's going to tell you if you just ate a huge bag of candy, I suppose. But for any sort of precision analysis, this is simply just not accurate enough. Okay, so what I learned, yes, the accuracy of the glucose meters is definitely in question. And the ketone strips, which I were using, which are kind of the cheapest ones I could find, very expensive. And they have a high failure rate. So I had 10 ketone strips, and only 6 of them I got usable information out of. All right, and then in the future, I have a lot of stuff going on, more Quantified Mind. I want to see if my scores will plateau, maybe compare it with fasting, see if it changes after 12 hours of fasting, 24, 48. Yeah, and thanks for your attention.
Great, thank you. We have about 6 minutes of questions for Ari. And Ari, if I don't, one of us should repeat the question so that it's on the recorder. Okay, yes?
How do you measure your REM? How do you measure your REM and deep sleep?
So that is provided by the ZO. You can track it with ZO and then download your data, and it has your REM for the night and your amount of deep sleep for the night.
Yanni.
First of all, beautiful work.
Thank you.
Really awesome. But have you tried looking at correlations between sleep and other factors when you control for practice? So it's pretty obvious that practice would be the most dominant effect, but because it's a fairly structured effect, you can control for it and then look for what's for the remaining 30?
Unfortunately, I didn't really have time there's a lot of more analysis. All those things were just, tip of the iceberg kind of analysis. A lot more can be done.
Aren't you part of Quantified Mind, Yanni?
So you mentioned that the glucose checker wasn't that accurate, or they weren't that accurate. How accurate is the ZO in measuring REM sleep or sleep as a whole?
Well, I have no way to compare it, nothing to compare it to, so I kind of have no idea. However, a rough estimate based on my sleep study, when I took a sleep study for the sleep apnea, it showed that I had no deep sleep whatsoever, versus the ZO, which said I had 40 minutes. So they weren't done at the same night or even within the same week, but that's the best I can give.
Hi, I'm just wondering, so you mentioned about brain fog. Have you measured, do you have huge variations in your day-to-day performance even without any of these additional experiments? So when you have or without?
Yes, I don't have enough data to quantify it, but subjectively, yes, there's an enormous amount of variation semi-randomly throughout the day.
Dawn.
Have you measured your deep sleep, your sleep overall, to see how it's correlated with the ketosis?
Well, so I've only done the 2 fasts, which I don't think that really gives me enough data to measure, but that is kind of on my to-do list. Naturally, it takes a while to acquire data when you're fasting. I want to do it every day. So yeah, it's going to take some time before I can look at that stuff.
Gail.
You mentioned that the ketone strips had 2 downsides to them. 1, they were expensive, and 2, not particularly reliable. At what point, in terms of cost, at what point would those strips be attractive, price point attractive, for you to test as often as you'd like to test? And how often would you test if that were the case?
Let's see. I guess 50 cents a strip. I'd be willing to test. I'd be willing to do all my test ketones for all the fasting, and I'm probably willing to do it once a day for a month or so.
How much are they now?
So approximately $25 for 10. Oh, to me they're not cheap.
Raj.
Hi, I was just curious, since you are internally aware of being exhausted or having mental fog, and you're doing the Quantified Mind tests, just what's your sense of how accurately the tests reflect how you're feeling at the time?
So I think I have been surprised. There have been some, but on the whole, I can kind of guess decently, but there have been some surprises. Sometimes I'd feel very terrible, and my score would come back. I'm like, wow, this is like the best I've ever done. And other times I thought, all right, I'm really on, I'm completely focused here, and I would do, mediocre. But on the whole, I do have a reasonable impression.
I think we have time for one more fast question. Anyone have something else? Yes, Kenneth.
And of course I blast on my question. The practice effect. You were saying that one of your tests didn't seem to have much of a practice effect, and I'm wondering if that could be because the test was similar enough to something that you did that previously that you had already plateaued largely on the practice effect from that test.
Yeah, that's it. That's a good point. And so, as I said, I've been using this program Brain Workshop before using Quantified Mind, and I actually used some concomitantly, and I ran a test to see if brain workshop and quantified mind are strongly correlated, which they aren't that much, but anyways, that's different data, not in this one. And so, right, so you would think that the NBACs would be the ones that I've had the most practice on, because I actually have been practicing that. And it turned out that they weren't. I still gained some.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ari.